Hi, my name is DC4260 Productions and welcome back to hell. And as always, this video is sponsored by nobody. Well, that was a weird intro. Anyway, the first video on remaster proposals did reasonably well, and I saw numerous comments from people suggesting other routes that could do with remasters, so here I am with a second video of this nature. I was going to include Northern Trans-Pennine and Brighton Mainline in today's list, but I've decided to save those two for a possible third remaster proposal video. I was also considering adding a full segment on Northeast Corridor New York to Trenton, but I think I can summarise what I'd want for that route just by saying the following. I suggest updating the included rolling stock with TSW6 core features, adding the NJ Transit Arrow 3 and ALP 45DP as timetable mode layers, overhauling the scenery, particularly north of Newark International Airport, extending the route coverage south to Philadelphia, or at the very least, adding the Princeton branch, fixing the inaccurate passenger information screens at the stations, lowering the height of this overhead catenary just north of Newark Penn so that pantographs don't clip through the overbridge, and making a busier timetable in which the route feels less like a total ghost town. I distinctly remember the New York to Trenton route having a disastrous initial launch when it first came out in 2023, and although it has since been patched at least once, I hardly ever revisit this route these days. First proposal for today's video is another British route, in the form of the Tees Valley Line Darlington to Saltburn add-on of May 2019. This is one of many TSW routes that's fairly short, only running for 27 miles in this case, and if you ask me, I think it would be nice if the route coverage got extended west of Darlington and all the way to Bishop Auckland. Your mileage may vary, but personally, my favourite station on this route is a tie between Teesside Airport and Redcar British Steel, both of which have become somewhat well known in more recent times due to the incredibly sparse service they received, and I would recommend watching Jeff Marshall's video about Redcar British Steel for some additional context regarding that station. Thinking back to Teesside Airport Station, and for whatever reason, the nearby airport itself kind of reminds me of Gisborne, Kadri, and other small regional airports in New Zealand, despite the fact that Gisborne and Kadri are smaller than Teesside Airport and don't have any international flights of their own. Anyway, I sometimes like to drive the Class 101 on that short service from Darlington to Middlesbrough, or vice versa, and am less familiar with the second half of the route, going past Middlesbrough and on to Saltburn by the sea. The base route only includes two locomotives, namely the Class 08, in a Thornaby-specific variant of BR Blue, and the Class 37, more specifically the refurbished Class 37/5 variant, in rail freight triple grey with metals sector logos, along with one diesel multiple unit in the form of the Class 101. We already had this unit with the Northern Trans-Pennine route, but at least Tees Valley includes the centre trailer coach, meaning that you can also run the 101 in a 3-car formation instead of only being able to run the 2-car unit. As for any post-release add-ons for Tees Valley, Dovetail released the Class 31 in November 2019, followed by the Class 20 in June 2020. In mentioning these two, I am reminded of how I've always found it disappointing that DTG only included one livery and variant for each locomotive. What the Tees Valley route currently has for a motive power selection isn't awful, in my opinion, but it could still be better. A while ago, I had the idea that DTG, or some other developer, could make a gameplay pack featuring various late 80s era liveries for the Class 47, such as Rail Freight Red Stripe, Rail Freight Triple Grey, with metal sector logos, just like the 37/5, and Midland County's Maroon, as worn only by 47973. Come to think of it, I wonder if the Class 58 would be suitable for this route as well. In any case, It's really frustrating to see that the Class 142 Pacer from Just Trains' Blackpool Branches add-on still doesn't have a timetable mode layer on the Tees Valley line, considering the fact that Pacers were running on this route in 1989, the year in which the in-game route is set. And the 142 that we've got with the Blackpool route actually has options for Tees Valley stations in the hand-cranked destination blind. I also see an opportunity for the developers, be it Just Trains or someone else, to model the Class 143, which also ran on Tees Valley in the late 80s alongside the 142s. As for what I'd suggest for ways to overhaul the existing Tees Valley route, they would be to upgrade the lighting to TOD4, port over the Class 101 improvements that are currently only available in WCML Preston to Carlisle, fix the annoying light bleed issue on the Tees Valley 101, add explorable station building interiors where applicable, overhaul the scenery to match the high standard set by the aforementioned WCML route, and make a new/busier timetable that makes better use of the industrial complexes halfway along the line. Despite the route's focus on freight trains, there are numerous yards and sidings between Allens West and Redcar British Steel that just go unused, receiving no services at all throughout the entire 24-hour timetable. That's something I would like to see sorted out for a remaster timetable. Same goes for the ongoing absence of a Class 142 Pacer layer. I also saw multiple abrupt and unnatural looking weather changes throughout my recent explorations of this route, so there's yet another thing that should be fixed, although dynamic weather bugs are not isolated to this one route. If Northern TransPennine and Tees Valley ever get remastered, I think the job should be assigned to Just Trains, since they have proven, with Blackpool Branches and WCML Preston to Carlisle, that they can do a great job when it comes to British Rail and 1980s era routes. Incidentally, Tees Valley was the last time Dovetail made a British Rail era route themselves. Next is the Bakerloo Line add-on, which was released in August 2020 as one of 2 new routes in the Train Sim World 2 package. It runs for around 14 miles from Elephant and Castle to Harrow and Wealdstone, and this route is quite significant as being the only London Underground route in TSW. And I remember thinking it was pretty cool when it first released, but it hasn't aged all that well. Part of the route, between Queen's Park and Harrow and Wealdstone, has already been remastered, in a sense, as part of the WCML South London to Milton Keynes add-on of 2024, and that has left the Bakerloo line in an annoying situation, largely because DTG didn't add the underground section south of Queen's Park as part of WCML South. This means that, if you want to drive or ride along the full Bakerloo line in TSW, you either have to do route hopping at Queen's Park, which completely kills the immersion, or suck it up and do the whole run on the original Bakerloo route from 2020. The original in-game route still doesn't have the Class 350 Desiro and Class 390 Pendolino appearing for realistic AI traffic on the West Coast Main Line, to which the Bakerloo mostly runs parallel between Queen's Park and Harrow and Wealdstone. So that spoils the realism, as does the lack of a timetable mode layer for the London Overground Class 710, which you will see on this section in real life, as the Watford DC line shares track with the Bakerloo line. At present, and on the original Bakerloo route in TSW, the only conventional trains that you'll see on the WCML as you're driving along north of Queen's Park are the occasional freight trains hauled by Class 66 diesels in EWS colours, and that's hardly realistic. Besides the addition of realistic AI traffic on the WCML, other ways the old Bakerloo line add-on could be improved are by upgrading the route to TOD4 lighting, adding the TSW6 core features, not to mention new suspension physics for the 1972 stock, fixing the incorrect dead straight alignment of the platforms at the northern end of Piccadilly Circus station, smoothing out the platforms at Jerry Rafferty's Song and Fictional Bear from Darkest Peru so that they're no longer clipped by the trains, touching up the outdated textures at some stations, like Warwick Avenue for example, improving the 1972 stock's in-game audio, fixing this bug where NPCs just mill about on the platform instead of actually getting on the train, which is not isolated to Elephant and Castle, and smoothing out the platform edges at early ABBA Song to lessen the ridiculous gap between the train and platform. Said gap is not this wide in real life. Come to think of it, there would be no point in adding guard mode to the Bakerloo line as London Underground trains don't have guards in real life. Or rather, they don't have guards anymore. For the tube trains at least, the existing 2021 era timetable is perfectly fine as it is, so that doesn't need to be changed. Personally, I think the most important thing, besides the realistic WCML traffic, would be adding announcements at stations and onboard the 1972 stock. The current lack of announcements in-game spoils the immersion somewhat, especially after you've ridden on the Bakerloo line and heard the announcements in real life.
The next station is Stonebridge Park. Please mind the gap between the train and the platform.
And I've always found it baffling how the much older World of Subways Volume 3, which simulated the C stock and Circle line, has a fully functional announcement programmer, and yet Dovetail didn't bother doing the same thing for TSW. 9 years after World of Subways 3 was made. Incidentally, the 1972 stock is somewhat notorious in real life for the appalling graffiti from which they have suffered, not to mention TfL seemingly not bothering to do anything about it, but the trains are as clean as a whistle in TSW. The only German route I'll be discussing today is Hauptstrecke München to Augsburg of October 2020. This route is only 62 kilometers, or 39 miles, long, and without any layers active in timetable mode, the only services you'll be able to run are either fast express services with the BR403 ICE 3 or S-bahn commuter services with the BR423. This means that, unless you buy the other DLC required for those extra layers, you won't be able to stop at any of the stations between Augsburg Hauptbahnhof and Mammendorf in timetable mode. I refer you to my video on the worst TSW routes, published in October 2024, for the full rundown on why I think this route is terrible in its current state. As for what I'd suggest for upgrades, they would be to fix the appalling amount of missing overhead wiring throughout the route, replace the old lighting with TOD4, bring the trackside scenery up to similar standards to the newer routes, such as Mittenwaldbahn, extend the München S-bahn coverage through the city tunnel and all the way to Holzkirchen, or at the very least Ostbahnhof, add the TSW6 core features to the included BR403 ICE 3 and BR423, and make a new timetable that's actually busy. At present, and even with all the layers active, the route still feels like a total ghost town, especially at München Hauptbahnhof, whose situation is all the more ridiculous when you see just how big this station is, and how many tracks there are on the approach. Next is the Harlem Line add-on of March 2022. This is the only American route in today's list, and much like the Bakerloo line, it was suggested in a comment on the first Remaster proposal video. Considering the fact that the Grand Central to Woodlawn section got remastered, albeit only as part of the separate NEC Metro North add-on, I think the original Harlem Line add-on needs a remaster too, even if just for the sake of consistency. Sometimes, I still like to take the M3A or M7A, preferably the latter, for a spin on the Harlem line, but the difference between this older route and the newer NEC Metro North is quite jarring, particularly where the lighting and general ambience are concerned. If you ask me, and seeing as they've effectively already remastered half of the Grand Central to North White Plains section, it would be a no-brainer for DTG to overhaul the rest of the original Harlem line add-on as well. As for what I would suggest for a remastered Harlem line, I have numerous ideas. Replace the incorrect passenger information screens with the same ones as what's used on LIRR Commuter and NEC Metro North, upgrade the lighting to TOD4, reduce the overpowered acceleration and braking physics on the M7A, add TSW6 core features to the M7A and M3A, adjust the position of trees that are too close to the track, do a general overhaul of the scenery to bring it up to a higher standard, and finally add the M8 as a timetable mode layer on the original route. At present, I find the M8's continued absence from the original Harlem line timetable rather annoying, since she leaves a large gap in the rail seam between Grand Central and Woodlawn. At present, timetable mode on the Harlem line is a little odd, in the sense that, while there are a decent number of services, the route still feels rather quiet, more so than I thought it should be, throughout a significant part of the 24-hour timetable. Ideally, I'd also want to see the route coverage extended beyond North White Plains, though not necessarily all the way to Wasake, although that would be interesting, since it would mean a reason to include the General Electric P32 ACDM electro-diesel locomotive and shoreliner coaches. It would be fine by me if DTG only extended the coverage as far as southeast, a station that's 53 miles north of Grand Central, and it's also where the Harlem line's electrification ends. As it stands now, the Harlem line is one of numerous TSW routes where I feel Dovetail cut the coverage way too short. To be fair, one of the add-on's saving graces is the varied stopping patterns in timetable mode, ranging from fast express runs to services where you're making all local stops. And of course, there's also the services out of Grand Central that only go as far as Crestwood. The last route that I'm going to discuss today is Spirit of Steam Crew to Liverpool of June 2022. I refer you to my video on the worst routes in TSW for the full rundown on why I think the Crew to Liverpool route is borderline dreadful in its current state, but here's the TLDR. The timetable is way too Spartan, causing the route to feel like an absolute ghost town. There are no tank engines, or anything else that would be suitable for shunting, included with the pack. The Fowler 4F from Peak Forest still doesn't have a timetable mode layer on this route. The notorious simulation issues, which results in the engines losing steam really quickly, are still there. The scenery is subpar in numerous places. There are loads of big yards throughout the route that go completely unused, particularly between Runcorn and Edge Hill, but also at Crewe as well. And, to the untrained eye, the only two locomotive classes that are included look very similar to each other, to the point where you could be forgiven for thinking that they are the same class. As much as I think the stupidly named Spirit of Steam is in dire need of a remaster, part of me wonders if there's any point in such a project ever going ahead, especially since the simulation improvements that Train Sim Germany are making for the BR23 as part of their upcoming s-bahn add-on are not going to be backported to the British steam locomotives that we already have in TSW. In that case, I feel like DTG would just be putting lipstick on a pig if they tried to remaster the Crewe to Liverpool route without fixing the balked Steam simulation. Anyway, if you've stuck around to the end of the video, you win something awkward and disappointing that happens in the northeast of England. It's a Middlesbrough moment.